I just lived through a father's worst nightmare. An HOA bully slapped my daughter during lunch, and his mother went online posting a fake video to make it look like my kid was the vandal. Her excuse? Boys will be boys, but girls must be held accountable. What they didn't know was that I'd do anything to protect my daughter, and I was going to make sure they paid for what they'd done. But let me start at the beginning. Before we dive in, tell me where you're listening from today. Lunch was noisy until a hand cracked across my daughter's face. The entire cafeteria froze. Phones went up. Her name's Tiffany. I'm Jim Bowman. 30 seconds later, the so-called HOA prince was the one crying on the floor. By sundown, his parents were next. It was Tiffany's first day at her new high school. 16 years old, sharp as a tack with a tongue that could cut glass. She gets her sarcasm from me, but she uses it like a weapon, calm under pressure, like a bomb tech who finds the whole situation mildly amusing. We'd heard about the Abernathys. Richard Abernathy, the HOA president, walked around like the ruler of a small beige kingdom. His son Chad was the prince, same arrogance, half the Polish. Just a loud, entitled kid who mistook fear for respect. Tiffany had him figured out in 5 seconds flat. The confrontation happened at lunch. According to half a dozen kids who later called Tiffany a hero, Chad was harassing a younger student, trying to take his lunch money like some villain out of an 80s movie. Tiffany didn't yell. She didn't even stand. She just said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "Wow, haven't seen a shakedown that clumsy since my dad tried to build IKEA furniture." The table burst into laughter. Chad's face went red. He wasn't used to being laughed at. He stomped toward her, his 2 little sidekicks trailing behind him like pilot fish. He puffed up his chest. "You think you're funny, new girl?" Tiffany took a slow bite of her apple, chewed, swallowed, and looked him dead in the eye. "Funnier than you, and I get the feeling that's a pretty low bar." Chad blinked, gears grinding. "You think you're clever?" She shrugged. "I think you're loud," one of his buddies snorted. Chad glared at him.
"Stand up," he barked.
"I am standing," Tiffany said, deadpan. On self-respect. "You should try it. Enough!" a teacher hissed from across the room. Chad's jaw clenched, and then came the slap. Loud, messy, and stupid. The room gasped. Tiffany turned back to him slowly, her eyes cold. "Nice swing," she said. "Cameras love angles." The vice principal pushed through the crowd. "Office now!" Chad pointed at Tiffany, stammering, but the VP cut him off. "Save it," she said, already filling out a pink slip. We got the call an hour later. I left work instantly, white-knuckled on the wheel. All I could think about was getting to my daughter. When I arrived, Dana, my wife, was already there. Calm as ever, notebook in hand. Tiffany sat beside her, more annoyed than upset. The school called it a peer-to-peer disagreement. Chad got a 3-day suspension. 3 days for hitting my daughter. I wanted to explode, but Dana touched my arm. "Not here," she whispered. "We handle this our way." That night, Tiffany brushed it off. "Dad, I'm fine." The slap didn't even hurt. What's annoying is that he's not even creative. Total cliché. That's my girl, joking under pressure. At dinner, the spaghetti steamed like a fog machine. Dana clicked her pen. Timeline, slap at 12:08, VP call at 1:13. Tomorrow, we demand a written report. Tiffany twirled noodles. Also request new seasoning. School justice tastes bland. Grant, our youngest, sipped his milk. "He'll try me next," he said. "And you'll do what?" I asked. "Use words," he replied after a pause. Dana slid her notebook over. "We don't bark. We document," Tiffany smirked. "We can multitask," I raised my glass. "To quiet plans and loud receipts." "Clink," Tiffany said, tapping each glass herself. Pre-victory ritual. We thought that was the end. A dumb kid, a weak school, a bad first day. We were wrong. That slap wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. That night, we got our first letter from the Oak Meadows HOA. A cream-colored envelope slipped through our mail slot. Not a welcome note, a fine. $200 for violation. Our house numbers were in an unapproved font. Apparently, even the number 4 needed fancy feet in Oak Meadows. At the bottom, Richard Abernathy's elegant, smug signature. They hadn't drawn a line in the sand. They'd drawn it right across our front lawn. They declared war with a lie. I'm a straightforward guy. You hit me, I hit back. Maybe not literally, but the principle stands. You come at me with facts, I'll meet you with facts. But the Abernathys didn't deal in truth. Their currency was lies, and their bank was the neighborhood Facebook page. The night after the fine, our doorbell camera pinged. It was 11 p.m. I checked my phone. On the feed, Chad, hoodie up. Spray paint can in hand. He looked left, then right, like a raccoon with bad intentions. He kicked one of our pumpkins, then scrawled something messy across our walkway. Before leaving, he looked straight into the camera. 3 full seconds. Perfect shot of his face. I saved the video, backed it up 3 times, and thought, that's it. Game over. The next morning, I emailed it to Richard Abernathy. His son caught red-handed proof. Simple, undeniable proof. I went to bed confident. I should have known better. They rewrote the story. We wrote it back, with receipts. Before I even had coffee, Dana called me over to her laptop. Jim, you need to see this. On the HOA's private Facebook group, run by none other than Karen Abernathy, there it was. A post pinned to the top. Hundreds of reactions, mostly angry. A long rant about new families who disrespect community values. And attached, a video. My heart dropped. It was a porch cam clip from across the street. Grainy, low quality, and edited. It showed our walkway with the graffiti, then cut to Tiffany walking home from school. They made it look like she had done it. They spliced the clips, cropping out Chad entirely. A blatant lie. They framed a 16-year-old girl to protect her attacker. The comments were vile. Unbelievable. They need to be held accountable. I knew they were trouble the day they moved in. People who'd smiled and waved at us days ago were now calling for our heads. And in the comments, fanning the flames, Karen Abernathy herself. We are addressing this with the family directly, she wrote, playing the part of the concerned, responsible administrator. The safety and beauty of our community is our top priority. I felt a rage so pure it was almost cold. This wasn't a schoolyard spat anymore. This was a coordinated, malicious campaign against my family by people who held all the cards. They ran the board. They controlled the narrative. They had the power. We had a single file on a hard drive that suddenly felt alarmingly small. What do we do? I asked Dana. She didn't look up. She was already working, fingers flying across the keyboard. First, she said, steady as stone, we document everything. She started archiving the entire Facebook group, the posts, every comment, every reaction. She saved the original doorbell video with its embedded, unalterable timestamp. She downloaded the doctored HOA clip and began running metadata analysis to prove it had been edited. She looked at me and said, "They think a lie travels faster than the truth. That's only true if the truth is standing still." She was right. This wasn't a brawl in a hallway. It was a battle of paper trails and timestamps. The quiet, organized woman who makes killer lasagna was also a meticulous planner who never lost a receipt. Every lie they posted became another item in her growing file. They thought they'd cornered us. They hadn't met my wife. The petty war truly began when the fines multiplied. It became clear the Abernathy approach was to bleed us dry, annoy us into submission. After the doctored video, violation notices arrived daily. One day our grass was a 1/4 inch too high. The next it was too green, a suspected sign of illegal fertilizer. They couldn't even keep their own complaints consistent. Fines weren't mailed. A board member would tape the notice to our front door with thick packing tape that peeled paint like wallpaper. One afternoon I opened the door mid-tape. Todd froze, paper in hand. "Afternoon," I said. "You missed a spot." He swallowed. "Just following procedure," he muttered. "You're on camera," Dana said calmly, citing bylaw 3.4a. Todd slid the paper into the mailbox like it burned him. "Thank you," Tiffany called from the porch. "We'll rate this delivery 5 beige stars." It felt like death by 1,000 paper cuts. My first instinct was to lawyer up and go head-to-head, but Dana stopped me. "That's what they want," she said, pointing to an HOA clause. "Any legal dispute must go through their approved arbitration, and we would have to pay for it." It was a trap, so we refused to play on their turf. We fought back on ours with glorious, soul-satisfying pettiness. First front, the mailbox. I ordered the ugliest, fully compliant serif number I could find. So curly it looked like a spider had taken up calligraphy. Hideous and legal, perfect. Then the welcome mat. They'd find us for a conspicuous mat, so I bought a plain black mat that read in white letters, "Oh no, not you again." Not exactly welcoming. Checkmate. Every tape notice ripped paint. Every patch the HOA made added a perfect beige square. By week 2, our green door wore beige polka dots, an accidental monument to their harassment. Richard Abernathy drove by, slowing to glare at the door until his face went a shade of purple. Those small victories kept us going. I called my wife's Uncle Mitch, a retired plumber from Queens who thinks every problem can be fixed with a bigger wrench or a healthy disregard for rules. He laughed when I told him what we were doing. You got a fine for a garden gnome? Buy 100. Make a gnome army. Declare your lawn the sovereign nation of gnome land. I thanked him for the idea and declined the escalation this time. He promised flamingos on demand if we changed our mind. The kids got involved. Tiffany picked up photography and sat on the porch with a long lens, quietly photographing the board members who delivered notices. She never spoke, just clicked away as they scurried back to their cars. Todd, the nervous deliverer, started using the mailbox, ironically doing things the correct way. Even Grant found his role. Do fines come with stickers? Tiffany asked. I want the glitter pack. Grant noticed the HOA landscapers always skipped the tiny strip of curb grass in front of our house, so he took it upon himself to trim it with scissors every Saturday. He spent an hour shaping each blade to HOA perfection. It became the most obsessively groomed 20 square feet in the neighborhood. Our petty war was absurd and juvenile, but necessary. It was our way to push back without stooping to their level. It signaled we weren't breaking. They could tape notices until the sun burned out. All we returned was another beige square. It was a ridiculous stalemate, but bullies hate being laughed at, and laughter was our weapon. The constant low-grade harassment was a rock in our shoe, an irritation meant to wear us down. I could handle it. Dana could document it. Tiffany could mock it. But I worried about Grant. He internalized things. At the dinner table, he listened to updates about our beige-spotted door, jaw tight. Grant is a wrestler. Rules, discipline, respect. You face your opponent. You follow the code. You win or you lose, and then you shake hands. He does not understand ambushes or cheap shots. About a month into our war, Chad's suspension had ended, and he felt emboldened. With his parents publicly campaigning against us, he apparently believed he had license to escalate. He chose his moment badly. He confronted Grant in the hallway outside the gym right after wrestling practice, Grant's home turf. Chad didn't come alone. His usual 2 shadows flanked him, ready for the laugh track. I pieced the story together from Grant's account, a dozen students, and a security camera mounted high on the wall. Chad stepped forward, trying to look big. Bowman, he sneered. My dad says your family are losers who can't follow the rules. He'll run you out of town. Grant didn't rise to it. He looked at Chad, at the 2 kids with him, and then back at Chad. Get out of my way, Abernathy, he said, voice low and even. Chad forced a laugh and shoved Grant hard in the chest. Grant stumbled but regained his balance. He didn't shove back. He planted his feet. That's who my son is. Never the first to throw a punch, but always the one to finish the fight. Walk away, Grant said calmly. Chad took that as weakness and swung wildly at Grant's head. It was his last mistake that day. Grant dipped like water sliding past a rock, hooked Chad's legs, and guided him cleanly to the floor. Chad thrashed, shouting, Get off me! Grant's voice stayed steady. You threw it. I caught it. We're done, Chad spat, red-faced. Grant leaned in. No, you're loud. There's a difference. One of Chad's cronies raised his phone. Dude, this is live. Grant released him, stood, offered a hand, and didn't wait for it to be taken. The wrestling coach rounded the corner, eyes wide. Problem? He asked. Grant shrugged. He tripped on bad decisions, he said. The coach looked down at Chad, sobbing on the tiles, face red, and then at the security camera. Nurse's office, now. Later, I watched the footage myself, replay, level change. Clean double leg, controlled descent, wrestling 101 technique, not muscle. I asked Grant what he whispered to Chad before letting him go. He told me it was simple. It's over. We're done. Don't you ever come near me or my sister again. Understand? Humiliation flooded Chad's face. He was pinned, powerless, beaten, and Grant hadn't even hit him. In the middle of a crowded hallway, in front of his friends and a dozen students, Chad Abernathy began to cry. Not quiet tears. Loud, messy, broken sobs. Grant held the pin for one more second, just long enough to make sure the message landed. Then he stood, picked up his gym bag, and walked away without a backward glance. The school called, of course. But this time the story was clear. The camera footage was undeniable, and every witness agreed. Chad had started it. Chad had thrown the only punch. Grant had simply defended himself, with precision, not aggression. Chad got another suspension, 1 week, and lost student council eligibility and team privileges for the rest of the semester. Grant got a talk about not handling things yourself, but no punishment. It was a clean win. But at dinner that night, a strange heaviness settled over the table. We'd won the battle in the cafeteria, in the hallway, but I knew Richard Abernathy wouldn't take public humiliation lightly, especially not when it involved his son. The fines stopped. The Facebook posts vanished. No drive-bys, no comments, just silence, and that silence was worse than any notice taped to our door. It lasted exactly 8 days, I counted. Then the certified letter arrived. I had to sign for it, my hand shaking slightly on the mail carrier's pad. The envelope was thick, embossed with the Oak Meadows HOA logo. Inside was a single sheet of dense legal jargon, a notice of special assessment. According to the letter, a recent inspection had uncovered critical structural deficiencies in the community clubhouse roof. The repairs were deemed emergency work requiring immediate payment. Initial estimate $300,000 total, $3,000 per homeowner. But the emergency revision raised it to $1 million. Now every family owed $10,000 due in 30 days. At first I thought it had to be a typo, but it wasn't. The board claimed to have received a last-minute competitive bid from a contractor whose name I didn't recognize. The vote to approve it was unanimous. Failure to pay would result in a lien on our property, followed by foreclosure. No 14-day notice, no appeal. The vote had happened in a closed session. The contractor, I noticed, was a shell company, an LLC linked to another firm owned by Vance, one of Abernathy's allies. $10,000. 30 days. It wasn't a fine anymore, it was a financial nuke. They weren't just trying to punish us. They were trying to erase us. I felt despair rising in my chest, but then something else replaced it, clarity. This was too smooth, too rehearsed. We couldn't be the first. If this was a system, there had to be a trail. That Saturday, I told Dana I was running errands. Instead, I drove to the county records office. The building smelled like dust, old paper, and quiet desperation. I spent 6 hours pulling property deeds for every house in Oak Meadows over the last 5 years. I paid for photocopies of everyone and came home with a heavy box full of records. Dana didn't ask questions. She just cleared the dining table. For 2 straight days, our home became a war room. Dana, the spreadsheet queen, built a master file. Every property, every sale, every name. Tiffany printed a huge satellite map of the neighborhood, pinned it to a corkboard, and started marking connections with colored thread. We cross-referenced deeds with HOA newsletters and old Facebook posts, and slowly, a pattern started to form, every time. It was the same story. A new family moved in. Then came the flood of violations, grass too long, paint too bright, trash can out too early. Then after months of petty harassment, the hammer dropped. A special assessment. Families tried to fight back. They went to meetings. They complained. But the board, controlled by Richard Abernathy and his inner circle, always shut them down. Crushed by fines and impossible bills, desperate to escape, those families would eventually sell. And right on cue, a cash offer would appear, always unsolicited, always just in time. It was always from the same mysterious company, an LLC with a generic name, Vance Development. Their offers were low, far below market value, but for many families it felt like a lifeline, a way out from the crushing weight of the HOA's control. Exhausted, broke, and hopeless, people took the deal. They signed the papers, packed their lives into boxes, and disappeared. Tiffany kept a box of red map pins on her desk. Each time we confirmed a sale to Vance Development under suspicious circumstances, she pushed another pin into the corkboard. At first the pins seemed random, but as our research deepened, a terrifying pattern emerged. The pins weren't scattered. They were forming a straight line, a corridor of properties stretching from the main entrance of our subdivision to the edge of the community lake. They weren't just buying homes. They were buying a path, My hands trembled as I searched the name Arthur Vance, owner of Vance Development. Dozens of business articles appeared. Then one photo froze me cold. It was from a local charity golf event. Two men, smiling and holding a giant check. On the left stood Richard Abernathy. On the right, Arthur Vance. The caption read, "Longtime friends and business partners. Richard Abernathy and Arthur Vance celebrate another successful fundraiser." It hit me. We weren't just fighting our HOA president. We were fighting a criminal operation. They had turned the HOA into a weapon, using it to bully families out of their homes and make millions in stolen real estate. That $10,000 assessment wasn't a fine. It was an eviction notice. Right then, we decided we wouldn't just resist it, we'd use it to set a trap. To catch sharks, we had to look like wounded prey. Our family had to deliver the performance of our lives. The first step, signal defeat. I sat down and wrote the most carefully worded email of my life, addressed to the entire HOA board with Richard Abernathy right at the top. I complained about the $10,000 assessment, the stress, the unfairness of it all. I didn't sound angry or threatening. I sounded broken. I ended the email with one crucial line. "With all these fines and now this, we're not sure we can afford to live here anymore." I hit send. The bait was in the water. We didn't wait long. Less than 48 hours later, an email landed in my inbox. Subject, "Regarding your property in Oak Meadows." Sender, arthur.vancevancedevelopment.com. He said he'd heard through a mutual acquaintance that we were struggling with the HOA and might be thinking about moving. He offered a discreet, no-obligation discussion about a quick cash sale. It was happening exactly as we predicted. From that point on, Dana took over all communication. She was born for it. I listened on speakerphone as she played the role of the desperate, overwhelmed wife, her voice soft and trembling, perfectly convincing. Every call was legally recorded, and a notary later verified every cash exchange. Vance was slick. He had the calm, oily tone of a practiced manipulator. "I know Richard can be a real stickler for the rules," he said smoothly. "He just cares about property values. But sometimes it's easier to find a place that's a better fit." He tried to sound like a rescuer, pretending to offer us salvation while standing shoulder to shoulder with our oppressors. Dana guided the conversation masterfully, getting him to reveal, without saying it outright, that he was working hand-in-hand with Richard and the HOA's intimidation tactics. After a week of back and forth, they agreed on a price 20% below market value. We accepted. The hook was set. He came to our house to sign the initial paperwork. At our dining table, he counted out our deposit, signed the receipt, and left with his briefcase. The arrogance was unbelievable. He wasn't just buying our home, he was flaunting it. That was the heart of our plan. The day before the meeting, I withdrew $10,000 in cash. Donna photographed every serial number and marked each bill with tiny UV initials. The money was traceable. The evidence was airtight. We weren't just defending our home anymore, we were building a case for fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Arthur Vance thought he was coming to close a deal. He didn't know he was walking into a trap, onto a stage where every word would be recorded and every dollar bill would become a nail in his own coffin. The day he arrived, our house felt different, tense, charged like a movie set. And in a way it was. Dana had turned it into a surveillance masterpiece. 3 hidden cameras. One disguised as a screwhead, one inside a fake plant, and one inside our digital photo frame, cycling through family pictures. The perfect ironic backdrop. But the real genius was the audio. Months earlier, Dana had bought an expensive stainless steel coffee tumbler. Unbeknownst to Vance, it had been professionally modified to contain a broadcast-quality microphone and wireless transmitter hidden in its base. It looked ordinary, but it was our secret weapon. Vance arrived right on time. Slick suit, polished shoes, fake charm. I greeted him like a beaten man, quiet, defeated. I told him my wife would handle the details. Dana appeared from the kitchen, smiling nervously. "Mr. Vance, can I get you something to drink?" "Coffee?" He accepted, of course. People like him always do. She placed the special cup in front of him. The trap was live. He started explaining the contract in slow, patronizing tones. Dana nodded, acting flustered and overwhelmed. Then she asked softly, "It just all happened so fast. That special assessment from Richard and the board. It was so much money. We never saw it coming. And with that, the walls of his lies began to close in. Vance took the bait. He leaned back in his chair, relaxed and smug. He thought he was dealing with a pair of beaten-down suburbanites, an easy mark. He thought he had all the power. And when people believe they have all the power, that's when they get careless. They start to brag. "Look," he said, leaning forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Between us, Richard runs a tight ship for a reason. He has a vision for this community. We have a vision. Part of that vision means upgrading, removing the residents who don't want to get with the program. It's for the good of everyone's property values." His eyes gleamed with pride. Dana pressed gently, her tone calm but curious. "So the fines and the big assessment, that's all part of the plan with Richard? To push people to sell their homes to you?" It was the million-dollar question. I held my breath. Vance picked up his coffee cup, took a long, slow sip, and set it down with a soft clink. The microphone was just inches from his mouth. Then came the smile, cold, confident, soulless. "Let's just say Richard and I have a mutually beneficial arrangement," he said clearly. "He keeps the neighborhood standards high, and I provide a simple, cash-based solution for people who find those standards too difficult to maintain. It's clean. It's business." There it was. Confession recorded in crystal-clear video and professional-grade audio. He had admitted to using the HOA as a weapon for profit, and when he picked up his pen to sign the fake contract, he unknowingly signed his own confession. We had him. The fish was on the hook. Now all we had to do was reel him in and show the world what we'd caught. The house went quiet, sound fading layer by layer. The dryer hummed, the fridge clicked, then nothing. Dana set down the UV pen. "If this goes sideways, we pull the plug," she whispered. I shook my head. "If it goes sideways, we push harder." She studied me for a moment. "You're scared of losing the roof," I said quietly. "Of showing the kids that bullies win." Dana took my hand. "We teach them that grown-ups don't scare easy." From the hallway, Tiffany whispered, "And we teach them to label their cords because I almost unplugged the main camera." We laughed too loudly, then fell silent again. "Tomorrow," Dana said, pocketing the recorder, "truth gets loud." The next day, Oak Meadows' annual homeowners meeting felt like a coronation. Richard Abernathy stood at the podium like a smug little king in his beige-walled clubhouse. His wife, Karen, sat beside him, clicking through a PowerPoint full of meaningless pie charts about lawn maintenance and mailbox upgrades. Arthur Vance, the guest of honor, lounged in the front row, smooth and confident. Every now and then he caught my eye and gave a knowing little nod, as if we were partners in his grand scheme. He had no idea what was coming. The room buzzed with the dull hum of the HVAC, the scrape of chairs, quiet coughs, a perfect soundtrack for bureaucratic boredom. Abernathy droned on about budget surpluses and community harmony, clearly trying to lull the 70 or so residents into sleepy compliance. Finally, he said, "That concludes the scheduled items. Is there any new business?" That was our cue. Dana rose slowly. Her calm, deliberate movement cut through the haze of apathy. "I have some new business to discuss," she said, her voice steady and clear. Every head turned. Abernathy frowned. "Dana, this is for pre-approved topics only. If you have a grievance, you need to submit it in writing to the board." "I think this is something everyone here will want to see," she replied, locking eyes with him. Before he could react, our plan came alive. I walked briskly to the front with my laptop. Tiffany, waiting in the back, unzipped a duffel bag and pulled out a portable speaker, plugging it into the wall. Karen shot up. "You can't do that. This is private property." I ignored her. I unplugged her laptop from the projector and connected mine. The HDMI cable was already live. I didn't say a word, just met her glare with a cold, unblinking stare. The first image that flashed onto the screen silenced the room. A high-definition still from our doorbell camera. Chad Abernathy, Richard's son, caught in the act of spray painting our walkway. A collective gasp filled the air. I hit the spacebar. The full video played, silent, damning, undeniable. Then the audio. Tiffany turned on the speaker. Karen's own voice, her Facebook warning about troubling behavior, played over footage of her son committing the crime. Her face went white. "That's stolen footage." She shouted, "It's ours," Dana said calmly. "Timestamped." "And this?" She clicked the next slide. "This is your post, isn't it, Karen?" Karen snapped. I posted what people needed to hear. And you cut out your son committing the crime, Dana said evenly. Play the untouched angle. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Henderson pointed at the screen. That man fined me after his crew broke my sprinkler. Another resident, Maria, stood up. And Todd towed my car after he tore off my registration sticker. Richard banged his gavel. Order. Tiffany cupped her hands. Order up. Laughter cracked through the tension. I stepped beside the podium. Short version? They fine you. Then their friend buys your house cheap. I turned to the screen. Long version? Press play. The montage rolled. Gasps. A chair scraped. A teenager in the back muttered, So we weren't crazy? No, Dana said. You were isolated, Karen hissed. Richard, do something. He raised his gavel again but lowered it slowly as if it weighed 100 pounds. The dam had broken. Mr. Henderson stood up, voice trembling with anger. I think I know what's going on here. He pulled out his phone. Seconds later, a new video appeared on my laptop, a security clip from his yard. It showed a man in an HOA landscaping uniform deliberately snapping his sprinkler head. The next image was a $300 fine issued 2 days later for poor lawn maintenance. Then Maria stepped forward. Her dashcam footage showed board member Todd peeling off her registration sticker in the middle of the night. 2 days later, her car was towed from her own driveway. It was an avalanche. One by one, people stood. And the truth finally roared. A dozen families, each with their own stories, their own pieces of proof. Videos of petty harassment, recordings of threats, a mountain of evidence. All of it pointed to one man, the one gripping the gavel. The room, once quiet and compliant, was now a storm waiting to explode. I took a breath. Last clip, I said, playing the waveform on screen. Then came Vance's voice, clear and sharp, pouring from our hidden coffee cup mic. The power had shifted. Richard Abernathy's little kingdom was burning down around him, and all he could do was stand there and watch. But Arthur Vance, the mastermind, was something else entirely. He wasn't a petty tyrant. He was a predator. And predators don't surrender. They strike back. He thought he had one final move. He thought he could buy his way out. The clubhouse descended into chaos. Homeowners shouted over one another, waving printed fines and fake documents in the air. Richard slammed his gavel again and again, but no one was listening anymore. His authority had vanished, and in the middle of that chaos stood Vance, calm, calculating, dangerous. To him, this wasn't a disaster. It was just a negotiation that had gotten expensive. He pushed through the crowd until he was inches from my face. His fake charm was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory stare. Okay, Bowman, he muttered, his voice low so only I could hear. You've made your point. Now what's it going to take to make this go away? Name your price. I'll write you a check right now. Just get up there and say it was all a misunderstanding. He was trying to bribe me, in front of a room full of people he'd hurt. The arrogance was unbelievable. He honestly thought money could erase everything. But I was ready for him. Dana and I had guessed he'd try this. That's why I was wearing a jacket despite the heat. Inside the pocket, my phone was recording. On my lapel, a tiny hidden camera captured every second. A check won't work, Vance, I said loud enough for the mic to catch. I paused, then added, but I might be interested in that cash deposit you brought to my house, the one in your briefcase. A flicker of relief crossed his face. He thought I'd taken the bait. All right, he said, smirking again. I like a man who deals in cash. Follow me outside. We'll settle this. He turned his back and strutted toward the exit. I followed. Dana trailed close behind, recording openly as we stepped into the cool night air. Vance stopped near the flower beds, an oddly public spot for a bribe. He opened his polished leather briefcase, revealing stacks of $100 bills. Our marked deposit. This $10,000 is yours, he said, holding out the cash. There's 50 more tomorrow. All you have to do is go back inside, say you were mistaken, and it all disappears. He shoved the money toward me. I didn't move. You're paying me to lie to my neighbors, I said. I'm paying you to be smart, he snapped. Take the win. Dana's phone camera hummed softly. Define win, Mr. Vance, she said. He looked at her. Happy families, quiet streets, no drama. Translation? I asked. Silence. Exactly. He lifted the money again. A faint blue glow washed over the bills. Dana's UV light. The hidden initials lit up like stars. Same cash, I said. Same cereals. Vance blinked, confused. What is this? Receipts, Dana replied. That's when a voice behind us cut through the night. Keep your hands where we can see them. Vance's smile collapsed. Two officers stepped out from behind a nearby SUV, moving toward us with calm precision. An hour earlier, I'd met with a fraud detective. We marked the bills and waited for probable cause. A public bribe on camera was all it took. The taller officer, a no-nonsense woman, stopped in front of Vance. "Mr. Vance," she said, her tone cool and measured, "we need to talk about bribery and extortion. Bribery, conspiracy, evidence tampering, all on tape." Vance froze. His head darted between the officers, the cash, and me. The smugness drained from his face, replaced by pure panic. He finally understood. It had all been a trap, and he had walked right into it. As the second officer tightened the cuffs around his wrists, the clubhouse doors burst open. Chad Abernathy came running out, his face blotchy with rage and tears. He was probably charging in to defend his father, but anger blinded him to what was right in front of him. His foot caught a sprinkler head hidden in the wet grass. He slipped, arms flailing, and crashed down in a clumsy heap, landing right at the feet of the police officers. And for the second and hopefully final time in his young life, Chad began to sob uncontrollably. His cries echoed across the parking lot just like they had on the gym floor years ago. Same sound, different lesson. It was a pitiful end to a pitiful little dynasty. Moments later, the officers returned inside. When they came back out, they had Richard and Karen Abernathy in handcuffs. The crowd of homeowners stood frozen at the doors, watching in stunned silence as the architects of their misery were led away in the flashing red and blue lights. We had done it. We had won. But as I watched those lights fade down the street, I knew the fight wasn't truly over. They were gone, but the corrupt system they'd built was still standing, and we had to tear it down, brick by brick. That night, their arrests dominated the local news. Our quiet little subdivision had suddenly become a national example of HOA corruption. The fallout was fast and brutal. Arthur Vance and Richard Abernathy faced a laundry list of charges: fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Karen was charged with tampering with evidence for the fake video. She pled guilty to evidence tampering and cyber harassment. Her punishment: 2 years probation, 600 hours of community service, full restitution for legal costs, and a 10-year ban from serving on any HOA board or moderating community pages. She even issued a written public apology to Tiffany and paid our defamation and monitoring costs. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the recordings, the marked bills, the testimony from dozens of families, they all took plea deals. They avoided long prison sentences, but their reputations, businesses, and lives were destroyed. Vance Development collapsed into bankruptcy. A court-appointed receiver began liquidating its assets to repay the families they'd forced out. But for us, for me, Dana, and the kids, it was never just about revenge. We didn't want to punish the guilty. We wanted to fix the system that had let them thrive for so long. Proof beats power when you show it, and we showed it. Now the rules would protect the next family, not punish them. Dana, with her gift for turning chaos into order, led the effort. She called an emergency meeting for all Oak Meadows homeowners. The same clubhouse where we'd faced them down became the birthplace of our community's renewal. The first order of business was simple: a vote of no confidence in the remaining HOA board. Every single one of Abernathy's loyalists was voted out, unanimously. We needed a new board, one made of people who had lived through the nightmare. Mr. Henderson, the man whose sprinkler Chad had broken, became the new president. Maria, whose car was nearly towed, became treasurer. They asked if I wanted a position, but I declined. I'm not a politician. I'm the guy you call when the pipes burst. I fix the problem, then I go home. Still, I agreed to chair a temporary committee to rewrite the HOA bylaws from the ground up. For a month, we worked tirelessly. We removed every vague rule Abernathy had used as a weapon. We added solid protections for homeowners. We imposed strict term limits on all board members so no one could ever build a personal kingdom again. Every violation notice now had to include time-stamped photographic evidence. We established a simple appeals process, no lawyers needed. An elected 3-member ethics panel would now review every citation before any fine could be issued, and any special assessment over $500 had to be approved by a full community vote. We made the HOA transparent. We made it accountable. We made it fair. Slowly, life in Oak Meadows began to feel normal again, but it was a better kind of normal. The fear was gone. In its place grew trust and connection. Neighbors started talking again. The community fund we created with money from the Vance settlement helped 3 displaced families buy back their old homes. Watching that happen, it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. Our family finally found peace again. Grant became a quiet legend in wrestling, a kid who could win a fight without throwing a punch. Tiffany turned her sharp tongue into power, becoming captain of the debate team, tearing apart arguments instead of bullies. Dana returned to her color-coded timelines and project boards, but now they were for family trips and home renovations, not legal battles. And me? I'm still Jim Bowman. I still drink my coffee black and prefer my life quiet. Our front door is back to its deep forest green, no beige in sight. But I kept the same old welcome mat. The one that says, "Oh no, not you again." Dana thinks it's tacky, but she lets me keep it because of what it stands for. It's a reminder that your home is worth fighting for, that sometimes to protect your peace you have to go to war. We proved that a handful of ordinary people, armed with the truth and the will to stand their ground, can be stronger than any bully on a board. We kept our house, they lost their kingdom, and for the first time in a long time, our little patch of grass was truly ours.